In this video today, we're going to be talking about some specific qualities of sound waves. We have already talked about that in a wave, the velocity is equal to the frequency times the wavelength. And you will remember that we've talked before also that as your frequency goes up, that means your wavelength is going to have to go down because the velocity in a particular medium is going to stay the same. Similarly, if your frequency goes down, your wavelength is going to have to go up. We're not going to be working a lot of strictly mathematical problems concerning this concept. We've done that in the last chapter, but in this chapter I want to really make sure you understand the relationship between these two. And the reason that it's important with sound waves is because with sound waves, as the frequency goes up, the pitch of your sound wave is also going to go up. Now, what do I mean by pitch? Well, pitch is how high or how low something sounds to our ear. So if my husband would come in right now and we would start talking to each other, and you would hear him and you would hear me, his voice is much lower than my voice is. So his pitch is lower. Since his pitch is lower, that means the frequency of the sound waves that he is producing is also lower. Since my voice has a higher pitch, the frequency of the sound waves I produce is going to be higher. If you think about a flute, flutes are long cylindrical types of instruments, and they have buttons and caps that the flutist will press. And what those buttons and those caps do is they change the length of the air tube inside of the flute. And so if you give the air a long distance to move down, it has a longer wavelength. And so the longer the wavelength, the lower the frequency. The lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. If you've ever seen a pipe organ, the old-fashioned kind of pipe organs where you walk into a church and the whole back wall or front wall is just full of pipes. Those great big long tall pipes are the ones that make the very deepest sounds of the organ. The little bitty short pipes make the very high pitched sounds. Well, the long pipes allow the sound waves to have a very long wavelength. And so the long wavelength has a very low frequency. Low frequencies have low pitches. Okay, if you have a guitar, for example, if you've seen somebody play the guitar, you know that they will press the strings down on the neck of the guitar to change the type of pitch that's coming out of it. The closer that the guitarist places his fingers towards the body of the guitar to press it down, the shorter he's making the strings. When he makes the strings short, that means what he's actually doing is he's shortening the wavelength. He's making the wavelength smaller. When he makes the wavelength smaller, the frequency goes up. When the frequency goes up, the pitch goes up. So when you have a short string, when you have a short pipe, both of those are going to indicate that you're going to have a much higher pitch in those instruments or on those particular types of strings. And once again, the reason for that is because the speed of sound is the same in the same medium. And so since the speed of sound stays the same, if you alter one, the other one's going to be altered as well. Okay? Now, as humans, there are certain sounds that we can hear, and there are other sound waves that we can't hear. You will recall that the frequency is expressed in hertz, which is how many waves would hit you per second. And so sound waves that we are able to hear are called sonic waves, and they are going to range anywhere from 20 to 20,000 hertz. And so frequencies that we hear are going to fall somewhere in this range. Frequencies that are lower than this, so that means they're going to be less than 20 hertz, are called infrasonic, I-N-F-R-A, sonic. So that means these are lower than what we're able to hear. And animals some animals are able to hear these sounds even though we can't hear them. And so animal sounds like elephant rumbling is infrasonic to us. Part of the tones of a cat's purr are infrasonic to us. They're there, but we can't hear them because the sounds are too low for us to be able to hear. There are also sounds that are higher than we are able to hear. So anything that is greater than 20,000 hertz is not possible for us to hear. You've probably had the experience of seeing someone blow a dog whistle and you can't hear it, but the dog can certainly hear it. That is because it is too high pitched for you to be able to hear. And so it's going to be higher than 20,000 hertz. And so this is called supersonic, which means it is, I'm sorry, not supersonic, get that word right. It's called ultrasonic. I'm thinking speed in place of what we're able to hear. So an ultrasonic sound is greater than 20,000 hertz. And this, a lot of times, is used in a lot of medical imagery. And so something like when a pregnant woman has an ultrasound, this is most often what we think of. The ultrasound technician is actually directing sound waves at a very high frequency at her belly. And what happens is that those sound waves, this is going to be true for any type of wave, but ultrasonic waves particularly are very good at bouncing off of things. And so the sound wave will go in, and when it hits a barrier, part of it will be reflected off and part of it's going to go through. And so then if it hits another barrier, part of it will bounce off and part of it will go through. Again, true of any waves, but what's true about these ultrasonic waves is that you can measure the distance between this first obstacle they've hit and the second obstacle that they've hit. And then maybe there's even a third obstacle that they've hit. And when you measure those distances, if your computer then is able to calculate those distances and then create an image of what the sound waves are bouncing off of. And so that's why now we are able to get very, very clear pictures of what a baby in the womb looks like because of these ultrasonic waves. And so I know a long time ago you might be able to get pretty fuzzy pictures of what was of the baby in the womb. But now the pictures are super, super clear. You can make out details of the child's face. And so it can be very helpful, not just for the proud parents, but it's also very helpful for doctors who are trying to diagnose problems. Ultrasound is used not just for pregnant women, it's used for all sorts of things, for diagnosing all different types of problems within the human body. And so because those waves are transmitting and bouncing and transferring their energy to different places, we're able to read that and then able to use those sound waves to diagnose all different kinds of medical problems. Okay, so again, if you probably want to make sure that you jot this information down. I don't believe these particular breakdowns are in your book, and I do want you to know them. So I'm standing out of the way so you can see. So you may want to pause the video, make sure you get the definitions down for infrasonic, sonic, and ultrasonic. And then just also make sure that you really understand the relationships between frequency and wavelength and pitch.